In this video, we'll give you an update on our land search in Vermont.
Hello and welcome back to Adventurous Way. I'm Matt.
And I'm Diana. For the past 2.5 years, we have lived in RV, and now it's time for us to find a home base.
That's right, in one of our previous videos we talked about our plans for 2021 and how they included buying some land and beginning to build a house. Now in that video we talk about some of the areas that we looked at in the US. We don't have family here, we don't have jobs that are tying us to a particular location, so our search was really pretty broad. But one of the areas that we were really interested in checking out some more was New England. And we decided to spend this winter in Vermont to see if we could handle the brutal cold here, and maybe Vermont would be one of those locations. I think it's fair to say that we have had a fantastic time here in Vermont this winter. And the last month or so, because our RV has had these troubles with the roof, we've decided to use this time to really progress that search for land.
So first, let us share what we are looking for. We are looking for a rural location because in our travels in RV, those are the kind of places that we really enjoyed, being out in the nature with nobody else around. So we're looking for a place maybe 30 minutes away from town that would have a good grocery store, but it's actually not that the 30 minutes away is the maximum. It's kind of maybe actually roughly the
target almost.
The target. We don't want to be too close to a town. We don't want to be like in the suburbs of a town. We want to be more rural. And another criteria is to be maybe hour-ish from a larger town that would have larger stores like maybe Costco, Home Depot, and so on. And then maybe a couple hours away from a major international airport.
Before we update you on how our property search is going, let's just recap what it is that we're actually looking for. We're going through this for the first time. We've never bought land or a property of any type before. And so although we have pretty good requirements for what we want, they are evolving as we learn more. Starting with the land, we're looking for a buildable lot. So this really means to us something in the region of 10 to 50 acres, not too steep, not too rocky, and something that's a very simple shape. We don't want a super long, thin plot or a weird like L-shaped plot. I'm sure other people can build on that, but for us, we want to keep it simple and just make it a nice simple square or something along those lines to help us get going. And the reason for that is because we want to build multiple structures on that land. Of course, we want to have the house on there, but we also want to make sure there's space for our RV, maybe a couple of friends to visit, and then maybe some other things around it like a garage or a workshop and some gardens. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later.
And in terms of acreage, I think it would be really nice if we had the space to have some trails on the property where we can go for walks or go for runs. Obviously, we will not say no to some nice views, but also we want to keep this reasonable, and we don't want to have a very long driveway because that just costs a lot more to build.
Yeah, and talking of driveways, access is also kind of a big deal. And although you may not think that winter is a good time to search for property, it really gives us the opportunity to check out how easy or hard it is to get to the land in winter when there's snow and the roads haven't been ploughed. Because of the nature of the properties we're looking for somewhere more rural, a lot of these places aren't on paved roads. So it's really important that we understand, is the road ploughed, who maintains it, and how easy is it to get there, not just for us, but as we've talked about before, for emergency vehicles, or even just FedEx and UPS to get down that road.
And one thing that we're learning is that in Vermont, Class 3 roads and up like Class 2 and Class 1 roads are generally maintained by town, and Class 4 roads may or may not be maintained by town.
So that's what we're looking for in the land itself, but there's a lot of other things to consider, and utilities are a big part of that. Let's start with electric. So I think I'm fair in saying that most of the properties we've looked at, getting electricity to the property isn't a big deal. In some cases, there's been an electrical pole right outside. In other cases, we may have had to extend it a short distance. In general, we've not found that to be too much of a problem. That said, there are a few things to look out for. So if you are buying a property that is serviced by electrical poles that someone else has paid to put in the last 12 years, you as the new landowner may be partially liable for that, and you essentially have to like buy those shares almost from the person who paid to have them put in originally. Obviously, if you put in your own poles, the same applies to you for other people who use those later on. So it's not impossible, it's just another thing to consider in that process. A few people have asked us, are we doing like an off-grid house? Are we just going to like shun that electrical connection altogether? The answer is no. We are looking to be grid connected, certainly at this point in time. I can certainly imagine a future where we have a solar system and some off-grid capability in terms of batteries and things. That's very much something we would like to explore. But certainly in the short term, I don't think we want to go completely off-grid. With the weather as it is around here, that would require a really quite big solar system, not to mention the battery storage, to have the amount of power that we want to be comfortable in our house. Plenty of other people do go off-grid entirely, and power to them, literally, I guess. But for us, that's not what we're trying to do right now. But we are thinking about that. So we are trying to understand what some of the opportunities might be to integrate solar and things over time.
In terms of water on rural properties, we'll definitely need to have a well. And it seems that in Vermont, pretty much if you drill a well, you will be able to hit water, which is in contrast to what we had seen in maybe Pacific Northwest, in more deserted areas, where sometimes that's not always the case. The well depth obviously might vary from shallower to deeper wells, but it seems that in Vermont, from what we researched, it could cost roughly $10,000 for some of the deeper ones. So that's kind of what we are budgeting for. What comes in must go out, so let's talk about sewer. On rural land, you have to make your own septic system, and the soil in Vermont is generally fairly poor, so most likely we'll have to end up with a mound system, which costs a lot more than at-grade system.
And a mound system, if you're not familiar with this, is where they literally build the leach field, all the pipes that drain out the waste. They have to then pile dirt over those because the soil underneath isn't capable of absorbing the material at the right rate. So another big utility these days to consider is internet connectivity, and for us that's super important running a business from home. Now in rural areas, getting good connectivity can be a real challenge. Several of you have reached out and asked if we've considered Starlink, and the answer is yes. Starlink I think is incredibly exciting, and I've been following it very closely. As RVers, Starlink offers huge potential to let us go places that today we can't very easily go because of internet connectivity. So could we use that in a rural location in Vermont at our house? Well, the answer is kind of complicated. The reality is that right now Starlink is still in fairly early phases of rollout. And although the areas that we're looking in are eligible in terms of signing up for Starlink, we're not really at a full rollout yet. It's not guaranteed that you'll get it straight away by any means. So we feel a little bit uncomfortable shopping for land, relying on something that's not even properly available yet. And even when it is, I still feel a little bit nervous about having just Starlink as the only available way of getting connected to the internet. It just seems a little bit risky to us. Plenty of people are doing it and it's absolutely possible, but since we have a choice, we're trying to avoid sort of constraining ourselves like that. So instead we've been looking at existing wired options. For us, DSL, which is basically broadband over your phone line, is out. It just isn't fast enough for what we need. And so we're really therefore limiting our search to cable and fiber. Now, these are very similar in a lot of ways, but one of the big differences is the upload speeds with fiber are much faster. You're probably thinking, Matt, you're crazy. Where on earth are you going to find fiber in rural Vermont? And that's exactly how we started this as well. Even back in the Bay Area where we lived, we never had fiber to the property there either. We just had cable. But we stumbled upon something the other week which has really changed our search. There is a company called EC Fiber. Actually, I think they're a non-profit organization, and they're basically doing a rollout of community fiber broadband in eastern and central Vermont. And already they're covering a large area, including a lot of the places that we were already looking. So as we've been doing our search for properties, one of the first things we've been checking is, does it have fiber to the property? Because if EC Fiber serves that area, we can get 800 megabit broadband up and down, which for us would be amazing. I've never had broadband that fast, yes. And that's exactly what we would like.
So here's what we want to do with the land. One thing, we want to be able to stay in the RV on our land before and while we're building the house. And that actually is regulated by zoning laws. And every single town will have separate zoning laws. So for every town that we're considering, we are reading the zoning laws to see how restrictive the rules are regarding travel trailers and RVs and so on. We would like to have that option.
So what are we actually looking to put on the land? Well, I talked to her about the house. That's kind of a no-brainer. We want to have a house on our land. But there's also some other structures that we want to have alongside it. We really want to have a garage. The weather here in Vermont is cold enough and snowy enough that being able to cover the car at night in winter would be much appreciated, so I'm not clearing snow off the truck every morning. And we also want somewhere to be able to store the RV safely as well. So we're probably going to do some kind of garage for the RV. Alongside that, I would also love to have a workshop. I used to have a small workshop in our garage when we used to have a house, and I really enjoyed that. I'd love to do more woodworking and learn more about that. And having somewhere that I could do that would be great. And then we also want some outdoor space. We talked earlier about the trail system, but also just some gardens. We want to be able to grow some of our own food, maybe have a greenhouse, those sorts of things. So we want almost this sort of little collection of buildings on the land. And again, just to tie it back in, that's why we're looking for somewhere slightly larger, where we can just spread out and just have a little bit more space to build these things on. And
the topography for that is very important. You want to make sure that there is in a flat-ish space and not everything is in the mountainside. I have already shared the process of online research in a different video. Since then, we have discovered a new website, which is Vermont Natural Resource Atlas, where we can see a lot more information on one map. So we can also see a topo map, we can see the grades of the slopes, and we can also see soil maps to see maybe how likely it is that you would be able to put a septic system in there. So that has been very helpful in doing a lot more research online so that we can quickly rule out properties that don't work for us.
Yeah, and so from that we've been able to really draw up a short list of properties that we think have the potential to work for us, going further than just those requirements earlier, like Diana says, looking even at suitability for septic and things. You can also see neighbours' wells, so you get an idea for like what you might have to dig there as well. So from this short list of properties, we've then been really trying to push in the last month or so, working with a realtor to learn as much about this as possible, get extra information, get the survey, get the deeds, look at this kind of next layer of information, and even actually getting to the point of then visiting some of the properties. So if you're not familiar with how the system here works, the way that you engage with a realtor is pretty straightforward actually, and actually it's working really well for us. The way that listing agents work with buying agents means that the listing agent is representing the seller and all of their interest. And as a buyer, you can choose to have a buying agent as well. In our case, that's the realtor that we're working with. And what's great about it is you don't pay any extra for that normally, because the buying agent, the realtor that we're working with, will get their fee as a split from the listing agent's fee for listing the property. So essentially, we can get free help and free assistance and free agency in the process of buying land. That has been fantastic for us. We've learned so much over the last few months, but we still had loads of questions, and working with a realtor, we've been able to get some great answers. So that's really, really helped us in that process.
Especially since this is our first time ever buying any sort of real estate property at all.
Yeah. So yesterday we actually went out and visited a property with our realtor. Now, this is a property that we'd done a load of research online about before, and we'd actually been to this property ourselves to look and see what we could see there. But going along with the realtor was really, really useful. With him there, we were able to find all of the boundaries. We were doing it with a survey map this time, so we could find all of the boundaries for the land, the easements and things, really understand what the lay of the land looked like. And then more importantly, he was able to help us understand how you might lay things out, like where you might build the house. And it's particularly hard when it's under snow to imagine what this might look like and it's surrounded by trees and things. It can be really difficult to visualize what that might look like. But with his experience, we were able to see where you might put the house, where you might put a septic system, and that was a really valuable experience. One of the things that it really highlighted to us, though, is how important it is to check out the access to the land. Somewhat funnily, at the end of the visit, just as he was about to leave, he tried to turn around in the entrance to the land, and it hadn't been properly ploughed because the land is empty at the moment. And unfortunately, his truck, four-wheel drive truck, got completely stuck in the snow. It took us about an hour to get him out. In the end, we had to, we tried all the traction pads and everything. In the end, we had to put snow chains on our truck just to get enough traction that we could then tow him out as well. But it really highlighted to us how important it is understanding what access to these properties might look like in winter, particularly if the road hasn't been ploughed recently. So I hope that's given you a good overview of what we're looking for and maybe where we're up to in that process. Meanwhile, we're starting to think about what we actually want to build on the property. And I do say what we want to build, because as much as possible, we really want to be very hands-on in the building process. and actually to self-build as much as possible. Now, there'll obviously, of course, be aspects of the build that don't make sense for us to do ourselves because we don't have the skill or the machinery or the people or whatever. And of course, in those situations, we will outsource as necessary. But as much as possible, we would love to be really hands-on. This is an adventure for us, and we want to be really involved with that and just learning as much as we can. But there is a little problem with this. We don't know how to build a house.
So we were very happy that we came across this school called Yestermorrow that teaches you how to build houses. It teaches carpentry skills and kind of a lot of related skills. So we're excited looking at their courses and see whether there are some courses that we can take ourselves.
And I helped out on a Habitat for Humanity build in Colorado about 2 years ago. And I was there for about 2 weeks, and it was great to be part of the team building a house. And it was definitely enough to whet my appetite for building a house.
We're also starting to think what kind of house we would like to build. And so far we have narrowed it down that we would like a 3-bedroom house with 1 master, and in the beginning it will be 2 offices, and then later if we have kids we can turn those back into the bedrooms. We have lived in 180 square feet of the RV, so we really don't need much space. We live out of the RV, but we really live in the outdoors, in the nature. And it's kind of what we're looking for in a house too. So we're thinking roughly maybe about 1,000 square foot home, and then it would have lots of outdoor space with decks, porches, and we talked about the trails in the woods. We're also thinking about building a basement because pretty much most of the houses in New England have one, and a walkout basement on a sloping land, that would be quite good to have. But then that also throws out any sort of discussion about square footage, because if you build a 1,000 square foot home and a 1,000 square foot basement, that's 2,000 square feet. So I don't really know how all this square foot calculations work, but it is what it is.
I think the point is that we're trying to build a fairly modest house. We like living in a smaller space. We don't want to have a giant mansion. We want to have somewhere that's comfortable for us to live in, that has what we need, and no more. Like, we don't need that much. So.
And we have really enjoyed optimizing our space in the RV and making sure it's multi-purpose and really well thought out. And that's kind of the same thing we want to have in the house as well.
And on a similar vein to like the staying small, maybe a minimalism kind of aspect in here, we also want to build this kind of the right way. So we've been looking at a lot of standards and a lot of concepts around things like passive house building and net zero energy buildings, sustainable building, all these technologies that are designed to, or building processes and philosophies that are designed to build a house that is sustainable, that is efficient, it's cheap to heat, it's environmentally friendly in many ways. These are all things that I think we really want to incorporate into our build. Not that we're particularly interested in getting certification for these things, although if that's possible, then that's something we would of course look at. But more because we just agree with the philosophies behind them, and we want to embrace as much of that as possible. We don't know how to do that, and a lot of these things are very complex. So one of our next steps is going to be finding an architect who can really help us to build, we think, a pretty cool building. We want to apply a lot of the stuff that we've learned in the RV, like you said, around making the most of a small space and optimizing it. And of course, a lot of the home automation and the smart home stuff that we've been doing in the RV, we want to see if we can transfer lots of that over to our house as well. So this journey is really exciting for us. We've made a huge amount of progress actually in the last month. Coming up is going to be a lot harder for us to do that, because now in less than a week, we're actually going to be traveling to Oregon, where we're taking our trailer to get repaired. So that's going to take us about 5 days to get over there. Hopefully they can repair it pretty quick before we come back. But all in, it means we're going to be out for at least a couple of weeks from Vermont. And then we'll have to quarantine when we get back. So we can't do land viewing for most of the next month, really. So we've been trying to progress this as much as possible, and we'll keep you updated as we learn more. I really hope you've enjoyed this video about how our property search is going. But we would love to hear from you too. If you have any experience in buying land or building a house or anything in that realm, we would love to hear your tips and your suggestions. Your comments in the past have been so valuable that we would love to hear from you. What else we can learn? We've got so much to learn, and we just hope you will share with us your experience as well. So leave us a comment below, and we will see you in the next video.
So far, we have narrowed it down that we would like to have 3 bedrooms. In the beginning, it will be one master and 2 offices. And if we have kids later, then those offices, we can turn them into... Stop it. Don't make me do this again.
Love you.
Have you... That sounds like an infomercial.
Have you got a low... Do you have debt payments up to your eyeballs? Infomercial Diana.